And hello. Good evening, all. I hope you are doing incredibly well. Like I say, welcome to our. I still don't know what I'm going to call our Wednesday stream, but maybe we're going to call it something else. I don't know. We'll call it something, but we'll get to it. So, what are we covering today on today's stream? Like I say, after we've done Jeff Taylor twice, we've done Andre Walker. Again, I just had a brief nip into his chat, and he is surprise, crying about the Queen of all things being cancelled at Oxford University. But there you go. That's Andre Walker. That's his entire shtick. He's engages furiously in the culture war. But yes, like I say, good evening to the people just joining us in chat. So we've got Alexander, good evening. Cloudhopper, good evening to you. Christopher, bonjour from South Germany. And Raven UK, who I've just seen comment as well. So welcome, one and all. But I think before we jump into Darren Grimes, I think we've got to answer the question, who is Darren Grimes? So in the chat, yes, if you know who Darren Grimes is, no, if you don't. Let's work out our knowledge of Grimes law. Shall we say? Chris Townley was cancelled by the government of 2050. Right. Dude's here as well. I'm sure after he ended up running the show last week, I'm sure he'll be running the show again. I've got a sort of from Chris. The dude. Probably not, there's no evidence that he is. But anyway, the law behind Darren Grimes pretty much starts, according to himself, he dropped out of university, according to himself, to essentially become a liberal Democrat campaigner. So apparently he was a liberal Democrat campaigner to start off with. He then, from there, went from being a liberal Democrat campaigner to being a Brexit campaigner, which is where he seemed to, from what I can tell, he seemed to get his, shall we say, foot in the door into the conservative blogosphere. Because after that, essentially, he got big because he ran what he called the youth arm of the Brexit vote. Darren was very passionate, bizarrely, for, again, reasons unknown, about trying to join, leave, shall we say, the European Union, and campaigned viciously for that on their behalf, which also led him, because I'm sure when you look up his name, you'll find that Darren Grimes was part of the very group of, shall we say, naughty boys who maybe spent a bit too much money at the referendum. Like I say, Darren Grimes was one of those people. I believe he was, from what I remember off the top of my head, so this may be wrong, I believe the Electoral Commission, found him guilty to begin with, so they fined him, but then they did not uphold the charge against him, from what I remember. I think that's how it went, from what I remember off the top of my head. So what happened then? Well, because he got his big start of being in the Brexit campaign, Darren immediately decided that he was going to leave his northern roots and depart down to London because he was going to become a journalist. And he fell in, by the looks of it, of a guy called Paul Steins or Staines. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But for those of you who don't know, Paul Steins is a guy who runs a blog called the Guido Fawkes blog, one of the most far-right not European, but far-right UK blogs in the UK. And he is very, very proud of that fact. And he hired Darren Grimes to work for him, essentially. So hence why Darren Grimes has earned the moniker of the T-boy at the Guido Fawkes. Hence why we called him a bit of a T-boy, T-boy himself today. So from pretty much there on, Darren gained a lot of notoriety about being this very, very young young guy who's vehemently very pro-conservative. He's very, very on the far right of the conservative agenda. He campaigned for Brexit, and of course, a lot of his big trap card, which we will be seeing a lot of today. I can guarantee you we'll be seeing a lot of this today. He loves to play the essentially the "I'm from the North" background card whenever people criticize him, and hence he has become, as we will again see a lot today, one of the reasons that he claims why working class people are following the Tories, because apparently the Tories are the party that support the working class here in the UK. If you know anything about that, and I'm sure we'll be getting into some of the hilarity hijinks today of Darren Grimes apparently campaigning on behalf of essentially, well, the campaigning on behalf of the Tory party for the working class. This is why I looked for it on Twitter, but I couldn't find it. Last week when he was trending on Twitter, there was a very good picture of basically him begging for a job at what's it, Global UK, the new right-wing Fox News we're getting here that's launching soon. That's going to be very fun. Don't worry, we will probably end up covering it one day on this stream, as well as probably the Guido, or however you want to call it, the Guido Fawkes blog. So, Darren Grimes, that is essentially his lore. Much of his backstory, like I say, it's all over online about some of the stuff. I'm not 100% sure I got it right on the his case with the Electoral Commission. I'm literally just going off the top of my head from what I could remember. So I think that might be the case. I think it might not be the case. But nevertheless, he's a very naughty boy. And of course, here we are on his YouTube channel. So we will not be going, by the way, to his website, because unfortunately, like a lot of the right-wing websites we are experiencing today, they are pretty much demanding that you not have ad blocker turned on. And quite frankly, I do not want to support right-wing, especially far right-wing websites by turning my ad blocker off. Like I say, if anyone knows a workaround how we can maybe look at the Guido Fawkes maybe one day, or maybe even Darren's own website, then yeah, we'll maybe take a look at it again. But for the time being, we are looking primarily at his YouTube page, what he would consider his greatest hits. So remember that these are what Darren here considers to be his top shelf moments. These are the moments to which he considers worthy enough to go on his own YouTube page. So here we are. I haven't gone through any of his videos. I've just perused some. So we might go on some of these. We might not. Depends. So, where to start with today? Well, I think we'll go with this one on his appearance on Sky News Australia. Why on earth an Australian version of Sky News would want a British Tory commenting on this? Not really sure. Not really sure. But as you can see from the title, we're probably going to have some good times because, as you can see from the video, Darren Grimes, Brussels vaccine bullying vindicates Brexit. When was this done? March. So this was back in March when this happened. And of course, for those of you who may or may not remember, all the Brexiteers and the right-wing press were hammering into the EU for essentially not being fast enough to buy vaccines. Now, they were buying vaccines, but what they were doing was they were negotiating the price to essentially make sure that the taxpayer got the right money, as we took the opposite way. We took choosing basically speed over trying haggling for a better price. And as a result, I think we've paid about, I think it's like 200% more for a single dose than many of the European countries have. And like I say, there are arguments for and against both these positions. So you can say, one way was better, or no, the other way was better. You can make the arguments for public interest on one or getting us out of lockdown faster on the other. The point is that these arguments really, when it comes down to it, is quite nuanced. So to say that Brussels was arguing against, or shall we say, bullying Britain over vaccines, you can't really make a case that it was, because the EU's justification for all this was that we are all not free until we're all vaccinated. And I completely agree with that, because we aren't all free from this mess until we've all been fully vaccinated. Like I say, at the moment, I've had my first jab a couple of weeks ago. So I've got my second one coming up a couple of weeks. So excellent. So yeah, exactly. Someone just posted in the chat there. Yeah, so the vaccine rollout vindicates Brexit. So Grimes and the other Brexiteers saw the 2019 global pandemic in 2016. Yeah. I'm sure. So we'll get into these arguments now. Let's see what Darren has to say about all this.
Darren, you mentioned the EU before and the vaccine. I want to ask what's happening over there on the other side, because it would seem from where I'm sitting that the vaccine rollout is possibly the greatest vindication we've had yet of Brexit. Yet over in the EU, Ursula von der Leyen and the Europeans seem to be playing this weird double game where on the one hand they say, oh, the AstraZeneca vaccine is so dangerous, we don't even want to take it. And at the same time, they're also saying, but if we don't get enough of it from AstraZeneca, we're going to start seizing your factories and banning you from exporting the stuff. What is...
Okay, two things straight away there. First of all, there are legitimate concerns to be worried about vaccine injuries, even though, again, the AstraZeneca vaccine, we have seen problems come from it, blood clots, rare blood problems come from it. Now, these are incredibly rare. So I would not be over too worried if you've had an AstraZeneca vaccine. I wouldn't be too worried about it. But the fact that we know about these problems is something that we should be concerned about. Because how do we know that maybe giving the AstraZeneca vaccine, let's say to person A, doesn't cause that blood clot, but it doesn't cause it in person B because there was an underlying issue that happened. So because these vaccines have come out so fast, we've cut corners. We know we've cut corners because we needed the vaccine at speed, because that's what we needed at the time, essentially. So one, that doesn't really vindicate Brexit for the first argument. The second argument was that both Britain and the EU had an agreement with AstraZeneca. They'd both signed contracts to have doses of the vaccine delivered. What happened here was that AstraZeneca was not fulfilling its contract on part of the EU. It was not delivering what it had promised to the EU. That's essentially it. That's the argument. Essentially, AstraZeneca were not fulfilling their commitment to the EU. Simple as that. You can't make this argument any simpler. So there was no reason that this vaccine rollout was going wrong in Europe because of the EU. Now, of course, there are other vaccines out there. I've had a friend in Germany. She's had the what's the one called? Is it the Johnson & Johnson? I think it is. She's had the Johnson & Johnson jab. So, like I say, there are other vaccine companies out there that are doing very, very well out there in shall we say, this time. So there was no real problem. So again, trying to use these two arguments as a justification, I've given you the reasons why this doesn't support Brexit at all, because again, leaving Brexit was well, like I say, the Brexiteers said that we could stay in the single market and the customs union, but again, they took us out of that. So again, it doesn't really justify what the guy is saying there. But anyway, let's see what Darren had to say to follow up to this.
Is happening over on the other side of the channel, Darren?
Well, quite. I mean, you've just summed up the insanity beautifully, James. I don't think you even need me. I can go get a nice gin now. I tell you, Australia, for example, Italy banned the export of the vaccines to Australia. And then they turned around and said, well, actually, we don't even want to use this particular Oxford vaccine. And you just...
Yeah, they were banning it because essentially, as we said at the beginning there, AstraZeneca had a contract to supply not only just us, but the EU as well. So Italy was quite annoyed that AstraZeneca in their Italian factories were not producing vaccines that were going to them. Instead, they were being shipped abroad. Yeah, Andrew said, I didn't expect him to sound like that. Yeah, I think he's putting it on. That is the most poshest Geordie accent I've ever heard. If it is a Geordie accent, it might be a Newcastle accent, but I have never, ever heard an accent from that area being that posh. So in my opinion, I think he's putting that on. That has to be, he has to be faking that accent. Has to be.
Just think, what are you people smoking? Because I want some of that. Because I tell you what, and I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to Sky Australia, by the way, but when I heard about the EU blocking exports of the vaccines to Australia, I felt vindicated in my own vote for Brexit and my own campaign. And in 4 years of...
What? So apparently the EU blocking the grounds to export to Australia because the factories were meant to be making a specific amount of vaccine that were meant to be going to Remember, this wasn't an EU decision. You'll notice he's changed the words there. You'll notice his very, very word clever play, because this was an Italian decision, not an EU decision. However, you'll notice he very, very quickly and very, very deceitfully switched over from to saying this was something the Italians did to something that the EU did. So he's being very, very weaselly about those words and interchanging them. That's again, not overly good. Yes, that is a picture, Bill, of who you think it is. And again, considering a lot of feelings I know a lot of people in that area have about Margaret Thatcher, I do not think they would be, shall we say, too impressed about his, shall we say, sudden found feelings on the woman.
Hell of an establishment class that tried desperately with a parliament of pygmies to take away our vote, our biggest democratic mandate for anyone or anything.
Okay, so it's okay. So he's taken it from the EU. No, sorry, Italy. He's taken it from Italy were bad from banning. So this is the madness he's gone on. We've gone from Italy is bad because it's banning the vaccines to Australia. He then changed Italy to the EU to the EU are bad because they are banning vaccines to Australia. He's now gone on to the fact that this somehow vindicates Brexit, to somehow, now that the EU tried to basically stop Brexit. No, they didn't. They did nothing to stop the Brexit referendum. They said, okay, if you want a referendum, by all means have one. They didn't stop it at all. Again, if Darren Grimes really wants to talk about the people who stopped Brexit the most, it was ultimately the very people that he supports. It was the ERG that stopped Theresa May for so long because they wanted to implement the hardest possible Brexit they have today. In fact, today, we've potentially been seeing rumors. I don't know if you've seen it. We are now being dragged into what is being dubbed sausage wars over this. And to the ERG, that's perfectly fine, because I think them trying to show that the Northern Ireland Protocol doesn't work was essentially their plan all along. So immediately, he is talking absolute nonsense. Nothing connects. Nothing works. The leap of logic he has gone to, from Italy to blaming the EU, to it somehow justifying Brexit, to somehow the EU was stopping Brexit, to complaining about they were somehow blocking Parliament from passing Brexit when it wasn't. It was the most hardcore fanatical Brexiteers who were doing that. If they had supported Theresa May, they would have got Brexit all the way back in 2016. We would have passed all this stuff, but they didn't support it because they wanted a super hard right Brexit. That was it. That was essentially it, and there we have it. That's, his logical reasoning for this doesn't make sense of how he's jumped from that to where we are now, but I'm sure we'll continue with this. Let's see where he goes next.
And we keep being told that the UK, by the way, as a gesture of goodwill, should give our so-called EU allies, and I'm sorry, what part of, I think, blocking EU vaccines, UK vaccine success, and actually imposing a hard border, albeit temporarily, on the island of Ireland.
What? How have we got to the Northern Ireland Protocol? How have we got to the Northern Ireland Protocol from that? That doesn't make any sense. And the Northern Ireland Protocol was something that the Brexiteers were, again, virulently against Theresa May. Boris Johnson then said that there would never be a border in the Irish Sea. Well, look how well that turned out. And then they then supported the Northern Ireland Protocol by voting for it and passing it into law. The Northern Ireland Protocol was a British invention because, as we've said multiple times before, the second you put a hard border between the North of Ireland and the Republic, you break the Good Friday Agreement. And that causes all sorts of problems. All sorts of problems. And as someone's just put it there, Prinny Bird put it perfectly. It's concept salad. He's just throwing out so much. It's gish galloping. That's the correct term. It's gish galloping. Remember where we started off? His very first words were that Italy were blocking vaccine exports to Australia. And now we're at the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Is part of being an ally. You know, they could never, I think, about as principled as President Biden has been in standing up to another bully, as in China. And look, I think fundamentally...
Why are we talking about China now? This is just, yeah, dude's got it right. It's verbal carpet bombing. That is exactly what we are seeing. No one's fact-checking him either. No one's challenging him on anything that he's said. They're just taking his word as a gospel. So Sky Australia, if you ever want to have someone from the North who was anti-Brexit on, please do give me a call. I'm more than willing to take this guy on live on air. If you want, that'll be fun.
This can be boiled down to jealousy, right? The EU is basically just a jealous ex that can't...
Right. So the reason for apparently the Northern Ireland Protocol, the reason for the Northern Ireland Protocol is because the EU is jealous. That's the answer. That's clearly the answer. Apparently, the EU is just that jealous of the UK that they made the UK government somehow, in its bizarre topsy-turvy world, make the UK government create the Northern Ireland Protocol, then negotiate it and put it into the deal, so that because they were jealous. Does not make a single bit of sense. The correct term for what he's doing is called gish galloping. And a gish gallop is when you throw so many different arguments or points at the opponent that when it's their turn to reply, that they literally can't respond to them all. Remember, the question that he's answering is what is going on over the EU and their vaccine rollout. We started with Italy was blocking vaccines to Australia. He then pulled some very, very weaselly words and then changed Italy to the EU. He then started talking about blocking Brexit. Again, the EU never blocked Brexit. That was, the Brexiteers that did that for a lot of the time. for the past couple of years. They were the primary reason that Brexit didn't go through a lot of the times when they were voting for it in Parliament. He then went to the Northern Ireland Protocol. He then went to Joe Biden taking on China. And now we're here at the EU is a jealous ex. He is literally throwing everything at this conversation but the kitchen sink. And I'm sure he will probably about to throw the kitchen sink as well at some point.
Can't get over the fact that it's lost the UK. And the UK, in being a nimble speedboat navigating its way through, I think, those choppy COVID waters, has got through it faster than the EU's Titanic-like monolith.
Questionable. Like I say, the EU is again procuring vaccines, but also individual countries also procured vaccines for their citizens. And again, they are also, the vaccine rollout across Europe is going pretty well. Yeah, and I've got to share this from Patrick because it's a Blackadder quote, and I do like a good Blackadder quote. So, yeah, this has just gone all over the place straight away. This has just gone all over the map. Completely all over the map. But there you go. Let's see what else he's got to say.
So we looked to the private sector. We secured vaccine candidates with fantastic success, it has to be said. So, guys,
yeah, and like I said at the beginning of this, there's two ways, by the way, you can criticize the rollout, because you can criticize Britain's for a lot of stuff, you can criticize the EU's for a lot of stuff, but the idea eventually both of them are working. And while you can criticize one over the other, maybe for like speed over like the cost to the public, or making sure that your dosage per vaccine is lower, so you're not putting as much burden on the public purse, there are arguments both for and against each other. Here's the thing: vaccine rollout is going very well over in Europe. So I think we can fully agree that, yeah, both sides got this done very well. But to try and bash the EU, and of course this was done back in March, this interview, but to say this didn't work, yeah, it's not really true. And like I say, trying to use the coronavirus to try and justify Brexit is absolute madness. And yeah, some people are pointing out here, just as some of the here, private sector only funded 5% of vaccine development. Okay, well, actually, you said you're not sure about that. I think that might be roundabout true. But again, lots of these vaccines were government funded, so they weren't exactly privately done. And the EU got the AstraZeneca vaccines from AstraZeneca, which is a private company. So again, Darren Grimes also having a dig at nationalized medicine service here. Again, very, very sneaky, very sneaky, by the way, just from his use of words from there. But yeah, an attack on our public health service, no doubt. So no doubt, I'm sure maybe Darren Grimes is against the NHS. I wouldn't be surprised, but he's against the BBC.
say to you all, I sod any gesture of goodwill to this Soviet-style bully. I think we ought to be helping our Commonwealth cousins, like Australia, long before we help the bullies in Brussels out of their own mess.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk of a trade deal happening very soon. This...
Darren, you mentioned the EU before.
That made no sense. His answer to that question made no sense whatsoever. That went all over the map. There was, it's difficult to understand where that started and where that stopped, because it wasn't exactly a very clear-cut answer. Like I say, he started off blaming Italy for blocking vaccine exports to Australia. He then very sneakily changed Italy to the EU. Then went on to talk about, you know, the EU were blocking Brexit. Again, they weren't. They have no power to do that. Again, it was his own team of Brexiteers in Parliament that was stopping that. He then went on to the Northern Ireland Protocol, something about Joe Biden standing up to China, the EU then being some sort of jealous ex. None of that made sense. None of that made sense. And then, of course, we obviously finally finished off with the EU are communists, which is an old Brexiteer. Well, it's an old British Eurosceptic gem, that. So let's see what else he had to say on this Sky News channel. Oh, this will be good. The death of free speech in Britain.
Britain was one.
I'd just like to point out to everyone, at the moment, because I must say at the moment, the UK does not have a freedom of speech problem. It is not happening. There is no freedom of speech problem. There is, however, one in the fact that we are seeing Gavin Williamson trying to pass laws to basically stop students protesting in their universities. Primarily university students protesting against right-wing speakers. That's a freedom of speech issue. So I wonder if Darren Grimes, although, yeah, the will was back alive back then in March. It had already been suggested by then. So there we go. Oh yeah, also I must point out, apparently on the Australian trade front, apparently the deal might collapse because there are the Australians are annoyed that there is strong pushback against their zero tariffs deal, especially from within the UK government. So it looks like that the talks between George Eustice and Liz Truss, that split is well and truly underway in our government. So already the Brexiteers are fighting at each other's throats. But anyway, now you know about the actual freedom of speech issue in our country that is being put in by conservatives, the people who complain about there being a freedom of speech issue in the UK. I wonder what issues of free speech Darren is going to talk about now.
Britain was once a bastion, the holy grail, or the Mecca, if you prefer, of free speech and freedom of the press. What happened?
don't think that's ever been the case. I don't think that's ever been truly the case that we have been the bastion of free speech, freedom of expression, and whatnot. I don't think that has ever really truly been the case. But yeah, so remember that what the question started with. It's a bit of a nonsense question, really. Like I say, we have freedom of speech laws on the books. They are in the Human Rights Act. Again, if you want to go and look them up, they are there. The very act that, by the way, the Tories want to get rid of. So, whoops.
Well, I mean, you just can't say it is anymore, right? I mean, if I give you an example, you've just mentioned my case there, but Harry Miller, a former police officer from Huddersfield here in Britain, he found out to his cost that you can be investigated and recorded as having committed a non-crime hate incident. And I want to just repeat that so people don't mistake how stark raving mad this.
I also want to point out that that guy was a police officer, because that was thrown in there by Darren at the beginning and then dropped. So just hold on for that for a second.
Stuff has become a non-crime hate incident without having actually broken the law and without there being any particular victim, because he tweeted a limerick ridiculing the notion that people can change their sex on a whim. Just like that, you can identify as a bloke or a lass. And so the police turned up at his office and
yeah, people know my stance on this. I am for our hate speech laws we have in the UK. I think hate speech laws are a good thing, because quite frankly, it makes people think twice about tweeting out their bigoted, transphobic, racist thoughts, essentially. I think that's a good thing. And I think that there should indeed be consequences. I do think that legal consequences are enough to be justified on that level, on that scale. Because here's the thing: most of the people that get caught within these laws are being racist, bigoted, whatever you can think of in those, in those terms. Not surprising.
warned him about his behaviour. Now, Harry Miller subsequently took them to court, and the judge in that case, he won, and the judge in that case concluded that Britain had never been an Orwellian society with a Stasi or a Gestapo. And I'm sorry, folks, I'm afraid to say, and it breaks my heart to say it, but I'm afraid that free speech in Britain is in peril. With every week that passes, there seems to be a new Islamophobia that's...
The only threat to free speech in this country is currently being made by Gavin Williamson, as he is basically threatening the right of university students to stand up and protest against speakers that they essentially have disagreements with. That is protesting 101. Like it or not, you are allowed to do that. That's protesting. That is a very real threat that is currently happening in our country. We've also got the recent bill, the protest bill, which is specifically being tasked and targeting against people like Steve Bradley, who is a very pro-EU campaigner. The laws almost target him to a T, targeting protests like Extinction Rebellion, targeting people who basically make too much noise at a protest. That is a genuine threat to freedom of speech. What he is talking about here is ridiculous culture war nonsense. At this very moment in time, there is a far, far bigger threat from the right in this country on freedom of speech than there is coming from the left. And ultimately, this will, I'm sure Darren will talk about cancel culture, how bad that is, etc., etc. But remember, just, well, in fact, very, very recently and continuously, for over the past year, right-wing MPs, pundits have gone after historians for essentially doing their job. And what was their job doing? They were telling people about the history of our country, that Britain was involved in the slave trade, and that there were some dark aspects to our past. I'm a student of history. I love history. I know that. I've known that for years. But there are some people who don't. And essentially, this comes down to people do not like the national myth of Britain being tarnished. And so MPs have targeted directly foundations like the National Trust and English Heritage, who have done absolutely sterling work in not only protecting the history and spreading the knowledge of history in the UK throughout in the entirety of the UK, if not probably known elsewhere about the world, what those organizations are and what they stand for. They have tried to pass laws that target those organizations if they even dare fund such research. So I'm sorry, but the threat to freedom of speech is not coming from the left. It is very actively coming from the right. Most of the people that, again, the guy that Darren's talking about, I have no problem. I have no problem of that guy being investigated. I have no problem. Because you know what? He will probably think twice about maybe tweeting something transphobic in the future. And you know what? That's good. Because if there's one less transphobe in this country who thinks twice about opening their mouth to speak something about transphobic or spout some transphobic nonsense, then overwhelmingly, I think that's quite a good thing.
Given a new hate crime law in our Twitter and identity-obsessed House of Commons.
Darren, tell us about
our Twitter and identity obsessed Commons. We haven't done this, and I'm really wondering if we should cover it, because I've said before, I do not like to cover culture war nonsense, even though we're technically covering it now. I think the culture war nonsense that the right comes out with is just red herrings. It's just red herrings all over. There's no point talking about it. It has very little purpose. It has no problem as talking about culture and whatever and preserving British standards. They recently brought out a manifesto against wokeism and policies that they might like to be put in place. In fact, a lot of people have branded it the Woke Britannia Unchained. And I dismissed it because I thought it's not really worth covering on the channel. Not really worth covering on the channel. because surprise, surprise, it's a bunch of right-wing Tories talking about how bad historians are, talking, essentially doing their job, or they don't like the fact that when someone turned up to a university to speak, there was a protester, or the fact that students who are actively often encouraged to take an active role in their universities decided that they did not want a certain speaker to speak at their university. They have every right to do so. So there you have it. There's no other reason. This is pointless culture war nonsense. There is no free speech. Well, not yet anyway. There is no current, shall we say, free speech issue in the UK. It is, though, coming from people like Gavin Williamson, who passed the law that, again, targets, university students from protesting, from, again, our Conservative MPs who want to stop British historians doing their job, essentially, and stop them talking about certain subject or certain aspects of British history. That is where the threat is really coming from at the moment. It is coming from the Tories. But, of course, Darren Grimes is a Conservative, so he won't talk about that. And with that, I'm just not even going to bother. I'm just not even going to bother covering the rest of this video because, to be honest, it's a waste of time. So, up next, we have in this little... so up next in this little Australian debacle that he did, this Australian Sky News conference that he did. Yeah, Alexander, yeah. Let's all forget Darren Grimes ever existed. To be honest, hopefully, after this, I will definitely try to get the existence because this is it. It's just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. But there you go. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. So, on to his final part of this roller coaster of an interview that he did with Sky Australia about ending lockdown and how the madness must end now, not in June. Bearing in mind, in March, when this done, this was done at the height of, again, lockdown, where there was still the coronavirus was still out there, still infecting people. Obviously, we have gone, I think, for the last couple of days about without a death from the coronavirus, which is good, but people are still getting infected with the coronavirus and it's still spreading. So we might have to go back into some form of lockdown. I know that's not a lot of what people want to actually hear, but unfortunately, that's the case. So, with that, I'm going to leave you for 30 seconds. So, I'll see you in a bit. Still not fast enough. Still not fast enough. Still not fast enough. So it's very, very clear that Darren here is part of the group of conservatives who pretty much consider that we should have never, ever in a month of Sundays gone into lockdown at all. Meaning essentially we should have just left the British economy open and just essentially watched the damn, bless me, and essentially watched the catastrophe of the coronavirus play out all over the UK, and that would have ended up even worse. That would have ended up even worse. Like if we'd have done that, if we'd have gone that path, I dread to think what our numbers would have been. But anyway, let's hear what Darren has to say about this.
Love your accent. Let's just start there. That's just adorable.
County
But
Durham.
I want to ask you about how these oppressive things are, these restrictions over there. Rowan mentioned the grandmother, 82-year-old grandmother, given a police warning for having a cup of tea socially distanced with her neighbours in their communal garden. They have a flat, so they share a garden area. Is this what the UK, the country of Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, has been reduced to?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, look, I've got Maggie behind me there. I just did that for you, Rita. But look,
So yeah, we just confirmed that is Margaret Thatcher behind him. As someone who I said before at the beginning, Darren makes a lot of his northern roots. Darren makes a lot of his northern roots. And to say that he is a supporter of Margaret Thatcher just shows you how much he has betrayed his northern roots. Yeah. But that's this conservative pundit grifter for you. And like I say, I'm pretty sure he is faking his accent. I'm pretty sure he's putting it on. I'm not saying that doesn't have that accent, but I'm saying he's deliberately making it sound posher than it normally does. Yep. And Sarafan makes a good point as well, that there is a new study about burnout in the NHS that's been doing the round recently, and our NHS staff have been put under immense pressure during this pandemic, and they are at breaking point. I do worry what there would be if there was a second, if there was another serious wave of COVID. And again, hopefully it's not. Hopefully we've seen off this part of the pandemic, fingers crossed. But we're just going to have to wait and see. We're just going to have to wait and see. And it's not going to be fun for a lot of people if we have to go back into lockdown again. I know that, but we will have to, because we need to protect each other. It's why we wear masks. It's why we went into lockdown to begin with. So anyway, let's see what Darren has to say about this.
I think our politicians and our media have got a lot to answer for here, Rita. I think sometimes I just find myself going to your Twitter account just to remind myself that there are actually sane people out there and on Twitter. Because I tell you what, we in the UK, I think, have, and let's not forget this, it's been a fantastic success as far as our vaccination rollout scheme is concerned. We've vaccinated now half of our adults. That's 100% of...
Still, there's still unvaccinated people out there. Not only that, we have seen this COVID mutate, so that it's got different variants. what happens if you remove lockdown restrictions and then you end up with a variant of COVID that is resistant to the vaccines that we've just done? That entire vaccine rollout program that he's just, so proud of, that was done by the NHS, by the way, not Johnson. Let's give credit to who really deserves the credit. So it was the NHS and Army Logistics that have sorted out the vaccine rollout. So that's who truly deserves the credit in this. So the idea of that is nonsense. Again, this is Darren Grimes so far. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. But how on earth does a guy like this end up on TV? Oh, that's right. He's in with the Murdoch group and crowd. And like I say, a couple of weeks ago, he was begging for a job on the new Global, UK Global, the new right wing news channel that's starting soon in the UK. Luckily, he didn't get one. I'm glad that although he will probably end up on there quite a lot. Let's not kid ourselves that he won't be on there. But yeah.
Of British people who are at risk, most at risk of COVID, they're protected, and yet, Rita, we are 100%.
So I've got a friend who is in fact, I know two people who are in that class. Just because they have been vaccinated does not necessarily mean that they are 100% safe. Because of their underlying health conditions, COVID still proves a significant danger to them. So the idea that we can just lift lockdown, and all go back to normal is completely 100% false. The idea that we can do this, again, not true. It still poses a danger. There is still a potential of it mutating again. That is a very real risk, because we've seen, like I say, there's not just COVID-19. There's the Indian variant. There's the Brazilian variant. There was talk at one point of there being a Yorkshire variant. So we know this thing mutates. So let's continue with his nonsense.
Of us are under de facto house arrest. If I go outside right now and
you are not under house arrest, you are asked that you stay indoors, because if you were to presume your normal social activity, you would run a risk of spreading the virus. That is why we brought in lockdown, to try and slow the spread of the virus, so that we could somehow get a grip and actually try to make a sizable dent into COVID. And to a point, the NHS have very successfully managed to do that.
and pop into a neighbour's house who I'm not bubbling with, I am breaking the law. And I
Yes, because you may give them COVID. It's as simple as that.
face arrest for doing so. That's how mad this has all gone. And
It's not mad. It's not mad. It's basic public health. That's how basic this is. Remember, quarantines and lockdowns are as old as pandemics themselves. You can go back to Roman or even Greek times and find lockdowns in effect because it stops the virus from spreading. Shock horror.
I say, actually, if we were looking at the data, hospitalizations have plummeted, infection rates plummeted. And if we looked at the data and actually said,
doesn't mean it's gone away. Just because it's going down, which is good, does not mean that it is going away or has gone.
okay, we're going to follow this data through and not rely on arbitrary dates, then we would end all of this now. But the government...
Yeah, and ending it back in March randomly. I don't know if you saw pictures of recently down in London where they reopened the pubs. I was really, really shocked to see the pubs open in London with all the people walking around who literally did not have masks. There was literally, I could pick out a few people who were wearing masks. There were some servers I saw who were wearing like the face visors, which was good for them. But for the vast majority of people that you saw walking around, they weren't wearing masks. And again, just because you have the vaccine does not make you COVID immune. It means that your body will be able to deal with the virus should you get it. Does not make you immune. And once again, this is where we reopen the fact of the potential for this being mutation happening. We've seen it happen throughout the past year of the different types of viruses that have been dubbed. Like the Indian variant that we're really worried about at the moment. We're really worried about that because that variant can spread very, very quickly and a lot more effectively than the other variants. What if that mutated to being immune from our vaccines? We immediately go back to square one. This is basic public health 101. Lockdowns are as old as pandemics themselves. And yet this guy is complaining that he has had to shelter his probably very, good life. Like I say, Darren Grimes is a very big conservative YouTuber. And as I've said before, lots of big conservative YouTubers make hundreds of thousands of pounds being online, because being a right winger online is effectively easy mode. It is. I'm sorry to say it, but it is. If I decided to start spewing right wing talking points, I could grow this channel a lot faster than I am doing now. But again, I have integrity. I have a bit of self-respect, and I really do believe in what I'm saying and what I'm talking about. So there is no way I could sell my soul or even betray my working class background like Darren Grimes has to the point where he has a portrait, a framed portrait, no less, of Margaret Thatcher. Being, it's just impossible to do. There you go. Oh my word, we've had our first Twitch viewer. By the way, I am simultaneously casting on Twitch. Dark Blue Alpha, hello to you. Welcome. But yes, let's fly back to Darren and see what else he has to say about this nonsense.
Is obsessed with the trajectory that it's actually set out of continuing this expensive madness 3 months from now, not now. So the media tried to play this down, and
So why now? We know the virus is still out there. We know the virus is still out there. We know it's still there. Not everyone has been vaccinated. We know that you can still get COVID even if you've been vaccinated. We are worried about the fact that, again, this could mutate, and putting a lot of people out there who still aren't vaccinated with vaccinated people could create the perfect environment for there to essentially be a mutation, which essentially renders all this vaccination problem, all the vaccination success we've had in the past year almost, to be rendered completely and utterly useless. That is why there is a steady step. I think it should be longer. I think it should be even longer. I do not think it is right, for example, that a lot of gyms raised hundreds of questions and petitions throughout the pandemic for them to open again. Because if you've ever been in a modern gym, they are air-conditioned nightmares. If you know the gym very well, you know during flu season, flu spreads in gyms incredibly fast because of their air conditioning. You know, I even took on the guy who runs the grenade bars. I saw him spouting this on LinkedIn, saying we want gyms to reopen again in right in the middle of lockdown, because, you know, gyms were a fantastic place apparently to be. No, they were literally COVID petri dishes almost. But there you go.
You know, you really made my heart sing there with your monologue at before I came on, because Sky News tried saying here in the UK, we're not as sound, unfortunately, as you guys in Australia, but they basically tried to say that hundreds.
Yeah, you know why Australia and particularly New Zealand are doing so well? Because their governments took COVID seriously. They are almost back to normal in those countries because they took it seriously. They had leaders who took it seriously, who knew what they were doing and took affirmative action as quickly as possible. Hence, they are almost at this point of going back to normal. Now, there are arguments that if maybe Boris Johnson had an ounce of a spine not to do something that wasn't popular, or to quote Dominic Cummings, saying that the British public would not be willing to wear masks or go into lockdown, when we perfectly were. We understood. Well, most of the British public understood that. But there you go. This is the nonsense of the anti-lockdown rhetoric, and I'm expecting some point to Darren to talk about the economy, because if he does, I'm going to go off on him. I'm going to go off on him massively.
It's turned out to a protest today, when actually there were thousands of people there, and those thousands represented, I think, millions of us. Millions who want the government to follow the data.
He's talking about an anti-vax protest that happened, by the way. So, yeah, I wouldn't praise, shall we say, that protest from happening. I wouldn't praise it at all. And bear in mind, there's a pro-EU protest going on in Sheffield, and I am still weighing up the possibilities of actually attending it. I'm still not 100% certain about actually attending it. Because again, I'm still worried about the potential of the virus. I might have had my first vaccine, but I'm still worried about it because, again, just because you've been vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean you are immune from the virus.
And who want the government to actually free those that have been so cruelly propelled into financial and mental misery. You know, anecdotally, back
a lot of those people who have been propelled into financial misery were the already ones who had financial troubles already, mostly caused by the fact that they were being exploited by the work with 0-hour contracts. You know, they might have been employed according to the government, but they'd only done about 2 hours of work that week. Those people who were on benefits, who again had to have their universal credit increased by about a measly £30, but that meant to that family that they got an extra £1,000 that year, which was hugely important to them. We've just had the confirmation that the block on people being evicted during the pandemic is about to be removed. I think it's either this week or next week, which could lead to hundreds of thousands of people being booted out of their accommodation. And they've got no work to go back to. Still, many of them, you know, this is going to be a massive problem. This is going to be a massive problem. And the Tories are not tackling it because they don't care. And yet this guy will continue to say those problems I've just mentioned are massive problems for the working class. And yet this guy who says the Tories are the champions of the working class here in the UK has nothing to say about how the Tories are not helping to support these people during this time of absolute crisis. But there you go.
Back home here in County Durham, I've heard from so many young people whose life chances have been completely blighted by 12 months of 3 on and off lockdowns. And it
yes, no, it's sad. And like Darren says, you know, we too have immense sympathy for these people, especially for the young people who it is affected. But the other option would essentially be which he seems to be talking about, was that we should have never have gone into lockdown in the first place, and that we should have essentially let COVID run wild. Our death toll would be who knows how much higher. And remember, I think we're still third on the list in terms of death. I think it's I don't know if India surpassed America yet, but from what I remember last time, I think it was like America, India, Brazil, then us. And if you want advanced countries, like, you know, the rich Western ones, then we're second. And that's the huge problem in all this, was that the Tories would have been very happy to just see all these people, you know, hundreds of thousands of more people die. And like I say, who knows how many hundreds of extra thousands of people could have died because of the idea and plan that Darren here is pushing.
breaks my heart that my once great country has muzzled its children in schools and
muzzled its children in schools. asking children to wear masks. Because here's the thing, schools during the pandemic have been a transmission center. Children, well, from what we can again see through the evidence, not overly, they do get COVID, but they aren't overly as affected by it. But teachers are, the parents are. Parents can then pass it on to grandparents, co-workers, you know, maybe the people next door, maybe the people they're bubbling with. You know, it's insane. I know teachers who have been teaching, some who have had caught COVID once or more than twice. And yet, we, again, and as much as we like to praise, you know, the NHS, and rightly so, they've been doing a fantastic job during all this, we have forgotten that teachers have also been out there on the front line. And that they have been exposed on the front line to COVID as well. We do not give teachers enough credit for doing what they do. And not just them, but people in care homes as well. We tend to forget that they are, you know, have been suffering during this as well. And yet, Darren is not going to mention those people at all in this, because, again, this working class hero doesn't mention or generally talk about people in the working class unless it's to have a go at them, or it uses his working class background to shield himself from criticism. Like I say, this is a northern, quote unquote, working class guy who's, quote, proud of his working class background, yet he has a framed photo of Margaret Thatcher in his background on his shelf at the top. So let's continue with his nonsense then, shall we?
Forgotten that once you give governments the freedoms and liberties that we once cherished, you seldom ever willingly get them back.
Yeah, that's been Darren Grimes, ladies and gentlemen. That's been Darren Grimes. Yeah. That was Darren Grimes, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Exactly. The grift from Darren Grimes is strong. It's strong in this one. He's quite easily probably one of the biggest conservative grifters in the UK. I am 100% sure he's making his accent far more posher than he's actually making out to be. He uses his quote-unquote working class background to attack people, and then uses it as a shield to defend himself, while at the same time having a portrait of Margaret Thatcher, who destroyed hundreds of thousands of communities who are still suffering the effects of Margaret Thatcher's policies in the 80s today. There is going to be an absolute crisis, and it is going to be the perfect storm of austerity, COVID, and Brexit. And all three of them are going to mix together and to create the absolute perfect storm. This is going to create an absolute perfect storm. This is going to have huge problems for us economically, socially. You know, we talk about being in a housing crisis. I think we're further along than that. I think we're in a housing disaster. Robert Jerrick certainly is not going to help the UK housing market post this. Rishi Sunak, by the way, was being very coy about joining Biden's tax plan, where all the others countries had agreed to a 15% tax on corporations. Today, we also learned Rishi Sunak wants to try and negotiate a way for the British financial sector to be exempt from that. Just exactly like they tried to argue for the British financial sector to be excused from the EU's financial sector agreements, which would essentially mean taxing them more. And like I say, for those of you who don't think austerity is coming, then why in Rishi Sunak's last budget, earmarked for all departments, was there an 8% cut? So that's austerity. In terms of Brexit, you want a picture to see how problems are going to form at the border down south. You've only got to look at what's going on the Irish border and what's going on in Northern Ireland. That is the window to our future. The Conservative government, on purpose, has kicked checks down the barrel, or down the road, shall we say, so that they don't have to implement them yet. Essentially, so they could have a local election without people talking about how bad Brexit's going. We know, we've covered it on this channel long enough, that Brexit isn't going very well. We've gone over 2 companies who are losing 30% of their income. Other companies that are losing all sales from Europe, who are basically saying it's not even worth looking at the European market anymore because of Brexit. That will lead to job losses. Then you've got to look at COVID. I've said before, I worked in the marketing sector, and I got lucky, to be honest. At the start of the pandemic, I got furloughed. I was lucky. A lot of my, shall we say, fellow marketeers, I won't name companies, a lot of fellow marketeers in places like Sheffield were laid off. Completely laid off. So they didn't get furloughed, they were just laid off completely. And not just marketers, but a lot of salesmen as well. Lots of companies out there panicked and just completely got rid of their marketing team and their salesmen. That's why there is a massive glut of people in that professions out there currently hunting for a job, because a lot of them got kicked out as soon as the pandemic started. And I got lucky. I got furloughed until Rishi Sunak dithered about extending furlough. And afterwards, when COVID has exposed just how deep the inequality really is in our society, the Conservatives aren't going to do a thing. They are not going to do a thing to help out the poor and the working class in this country. It is going to be an absolute nightmare. Those 3 things combined together are going to create a perfect a perfect storm. And it is not going to be good for a whole lot of people out there. It is not going to be good at all for a whole swathe of people. But take note, because people like this guy, Darren Grimes, are going to be out there cheerleading the Conservatives, saying that all is well for the working class. When in reality, it is anything but. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. Thank you so much. I do think Max has a live stream in about 30 minutes to an hour, maybe. So go join him there. Go say I said hi. If you would like to support the channel, by the way, there are links down below to my Patreon page, or you can buy me a coffee in the links down below. And also, you can now join the Pony Club. Yes, I have set up a YouTube membership option where if you join the Pony Club, you get access to unique emotes that you can use in live stream as well on the channel. Oh, Max was yesterday? Oh, well, never mind. But yes, thank you all for joining me. Like I say, we are also now broadcasting as well on Twitch as well. So we've had 2 or 3 viewers on Twitch as well today, which has been absolutely fantastic. So thank you to those people joining us on Twitch. Like I say, if you want to come over and subscribe to us on here, then come and join us. So like I say, have a very good time. Like I say, the next time I will be live streaming, of course, will be the Good Morning Walk. So I will see you all on Saturday morning, early doors as always, for another wonderful Good Morning Walk. We will talk about the week's fun, week's British politics and fun stuff that's happened. So, like I say, as always, thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you all next time. And hopefully next Wednesday we'll be talking about someone else. Probably not Darren Grimes. Maybe it's that other Brexiteer you guys keep on telling me to have a look at. I can't remember his name. Or maybe we'll have a look at the Guido Fawkes. Or maybe we'll have a look at someone else completely different. Or maybe we'll just have a look at Jeff Taylor. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.